Hi Internet, welcome to the Greg Troyan YouTube channel, and welcome to Greg's 14 Adventures, a weekly vlog where I discuss my journey through Final Fantasy XIV as a first-time player. I beat A Realm Reborn back in 2022, and I'm finally finishing up the rest of the game. These vlogs are documenting my journey. If you like these videos and want to support their continued production, the best way to do that is to like the video, share it on a relevant social media site like Reddit, and leave a comment. And don't forget to check out the playlist of previous episodes, linked in the description and pinned comment. Thanks, pal. Hello friends, it's your buddy Greg. Hope you're having a great day, hope you're having a great life, and I hope you're ready for a spooktacular episode. This week we are continuing our journey through the great Final Fantasy XIV filler arc, and we are on All Saints' Wake, the penultimate holiday of us going through all of the seasonal events in Final Fantasy XIV. We're almost done before we move on to all of the job quests. But this is one I've been looking forward to for quite a while. Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. I love dressing up in costumes. One reason I did glam rock for so many years is because dressing up is fun. Who doesn't like dressing up? My band Lipstick, as mentioned in previous vlogs, was a very theatrical glam rock band, and Halloween was always our biggest show of the year. We'd always have a big, elaborate stage show with battles with villains and scripts, and it was more like a play than like a traditional rock concert. And actually, yeah, the first ever Lipstick concert, our concert debut, was on Halloween. So Halloween has always been, a very important holiday to me. Very important for the band, but, loved it every year. All the costumes dressed up as a kid. Even though I'm not really a horror fan, I don't really like the genre. Just the creativity and everyone expressing themselves in such a way I think is really, really fun. And, I always enjoyed the Halloween events in Final Fantasy XI, too. I thought those were very good. Probably the best seasonal events in Final Fantasy XI were the Halloween events. And I've always really enjoyed the All Saints' Wake events in Final Fantasy XIV since I started playing the game. I always thought the scenarios and writing were some of the stronger ones in the seasonal events. I thought the vibes were always good. I thought the activities were always very entertaining. And so I had pretty high expectations going into this, going back and watching the old All Saints' Wake events that I'd missed over the years. And it was pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. It didn't necessarily blow me away, and that's, partially because, I had a pretty high expectation going in, but it didn't underwhelm either. It was very, very good all around, and I really enjoyed going through these old Halloween seasonal events, and I'm excited to share my thoughts on them with you. So 2013's All Saints' Wake event is actually one that could be done in any of the three city-states, so you could begin in Gridania, Limsa, or Ul'dah. And so while since then pretty much every event has started in Gridania, this early All Saints' Wake event could be started in any of the city-states. But it begins with us getting a ghost outfit from the Impresario to celebrate All Saints' Wake, and then we go and scare monsters in the three different city-states to get some candy. And so you have to use different techniques to scare different monsters to be most effective. So, for example, the pudding is scared of being eaten, so you have to say you're from the Culinarians Guild to scare him. The zombie in Ul'dah frightens easily, so to get his candy, we just are nice to him. That's when you don't scare. You get the candy from him just for being nice. And then there's a big guy in Gridania who gets scared of clapping. And so, like I said, there's different techniques you use to scare the different monsters or to just get candy from the monsters. But after you get candy from the monsters, you feed candy to the magic pot to complete the quest. And then to do the next part of the All Saints' Wake quest line, you have to wait until dark, which felt very Final Fantasy XI-esque with the timed wait. So after it gets dark, we talk with the Impresario again, who explains that the mask that they wear was crafted in the likeness of the Great Gourd, the patron saint of All Saints' Wake, and that the next task in celebrating All Saints' Wake is to go around lighting jack-o'-lanterns with a similar visage all around Limsa. And so when we light the final lantern, it speaks to us and makes us suspicious of the Impresario and his troupe, because it gives us some very cryptic dialogue. And so after talking with some Limsa NPCs to gather info about the troupe, we throw a firework in the Impresario's face, and he morphs into his true form, an imp. The Impresario explains that All Saints' Wake used to be a time when monsters could hang in the city-states, and wanted to bring back the old traditions of fiends and non-fiends hanging out, even if the fiends are causing just a little bit of mischief. And so we ultimately decide not to fight, and the Impresario asks how we found out about them, and we explained that a pumpkin told us. The Impresario explains that the Great Gourd, which he mentioned previously, was just something that he made up, but perhaps there's more to it. And so the awards for doing the event are 2 different ghost outfits. 2014's event starts off in Gridania, which is going to be pretty much the standard for all going forward. Godric from the Adventurers Guild is trying to infiltrate the Continental Circus, which wasn't named last time, if I recall correctly, but I think they've been retroactively named the Continental Circus, the troupe that was hosting All Saints' Wake last year. But anyway, he's trying to infiltrate the Continental Circus because he knows that they're secretly monsters, and while they haven't hurt anybody yet, Godric wants to keep an eye on them. But since they know that he's onto them, they won't let him join their ranks, and he asks us to spy on the group on his behalf. And so we talk to the illusionist who transforms us into a bat to scare people around town to celebrate All Saints' Wake. because, that's what it is. It's got to be spooky and scary, and you got to scare people. And I guess what you're transformed into is random, and I guess the NPC dialogue varies slightly based upon what creature you got turned into, and I guess one of the things you can turn into is Kane-sama, which is pretty fun. And so we go around town trying to scare different NPCs, but they're not really afraid, they're more amused/impressed by the glamour. And so they're like, oh, that's a cool transformation. So like the goal of scaring people is not working. And so we report back to the illusionist, who lets it slip that if there is enough terror, they won't be able to bring about the Night of Devilry, like the woman said. And so we're like, wait, Night of Devilry? What woman told us about the Night of Devilry? And what's the Night of Devilry? And, then the impresario laughs it off and like, no, it's just a line from play. And please go to Limsa and continue frightening people. And then we see the Great Gourd watching in the distance, who I know from future seasonal events. So the Great Gourd is watching over all this. And we tell Garukulane what we know, and he tells us that, according to legend, the Night of Devilry is a night where a pumpkin-headed fiend leads creatures of darkness to wreak havoc on the realm. So then we head out to Limsa to talk with an illusionist who tells us to place 3 jack-o'-lanterns in 3 different places in Limsa, while transformed. And so we start dropping off the jack-o'-lanterns, but each place we go to leave them, the NPCs there tell us that we can leave them there for now, but they're kind of like a hassle in the way, and they'll probably move them or just toss them later. And so we report back to the illusionist, and they're excited about bringing out the Night of Devilry, but then we hear 2 Maelstrom soldiers nearby talking about how someone has been annoyingly dropping off jack-o'-lanterns around town, but they've already all been thrown out. So the plan of placing the jack-o'-lanterns in certain places to cast a spell to bring about the Night of Devilry is foiled. So next up we go to Ulda, where Garukulane informs us that the Continental Circus is hosting a costume parade, but it is likely still part of their plot. And so we talk with an illusionist there who asks us to hand out flyers to help promote the parade, and it's kind of like a chain letter. There's a thing on the flyer that says if you invite 14 people in 4 hours, you'll know great happiness. So after handing out the flyers, we can participate in the parade, which is a fate where you need to cast a charm on the crowd to spread happiness while transformed. But if you cast a spell on a thaumaturge, they'll turn you back into your true form. Probably because they're sus about the fiends running All Saints' Wake. They know what's up. They're like, yeah, we recognize these are, minions of the underworld. We're not going to play. As far as transformations here, you can actually transform into Nanabo and Raban here, which is setting the precedent for transformations in later years at the Haunted House. And so to start the fate, you talk with the illusionist to transform, and then follow the Ogre Pumpkinhead, aka the Great Gourd, through the streets of Ulda, casting happiness on citizens as you pass by, but careful not to cast a spell on a thaumaturge, lest you lose your transformation and have to go back and get the illusion cast upon you again. After doing the fate, we report back to the illusionist, who says that they're going to a meeting with the impresario at the Gold Court and tells us not to come. The fiends are really bad at avoiding info leaks because they were trying not to let it leak that they were going to a meeting at the Gold Court, but they're just really bad at letting that stuff slip. And so we go to the Gold Court and lie in wait, and the impresario and the illusionist reveal their true forms and talk about how the charms cast during the fate will turn everyone into fiends, and that the plot was suggested by the Great Gourd. And so we report back to Garukulane about this, and he says we need to stop the parade from happening, but Momodi then shows up and tells us that the charm is harmless. It's one she's very familiar with, and then we realize that the Continental Circus was misled the entire time by the Great Gourd, so they thought they were going to be turning everyone into fiends, but really the Great Gourd was basically just playing a prank on them. The Great Gourd wanted to make an event where fiends and non-fiends could just have a night of fun, and so she ended up being the trickster for the fiends. And it was a really clever ending. It was really fun. I liked it. This was a really good little event. And the reward for doing the event is a full witch outfit. 2015's event begins with us talking to an Adventurers Guild investigator in Gridania, who asked us to find out what the fiends in the Continental Circus have planned this year. So basically, the Adventurers Guild know that the Continental Circus are fiends, but since nobody has gotten hurt and people seem to like the Continental Circus, they allow them to do the All Saints' Wake events, but they still want to keep a close eye on them because, they're fiends and they don't trust them. And basically an excuse to allow All Saints' Wake events to continue through the years, but also make the Adventurers Guild realize that, hey, these are monsters, we should keep an eye on them. Just a convenient writing excuse. And so we go and talk to members of the Continental Circus to find out their focus this year is on getting children to come to Hearst Mill for costumes and sweets. And so we report this to the Adventurers Guild investigator, and we get our first reward of this quest, a full witch outfit, and then we make our way to Hearst Mill, where we find that several children have gone missing. We investigate around town, and find out that someone dressed as a witch led the children off into the shadows. We see a child transformed by a witch, and the witch talks with the impresario about how the transformations are permanent, and when the children realize that there will be so much terror, and if there is enough terror in the realm, it will bring about the Night of Devilry. And so then we run into the Great Gourd, who asks us what is wrong, and we explain. And so the Great Gourd gives us cookies to give to children to undo the spell, but the cookies only work if we're dressed up in a costume. And so we go and give cookies to the kids to get them to turn back to normal, and we get another reward, the Pumpkin Butler Minion, and move on to the third quest for the year's event. We hear that the Continental Circus is spiriting away children in Brent Branch Meadows, and so we go there and meet with the Great Gourd, who gives us a magic broom that we can use to stop the Continental Circus from casting spells on the children. We ride around on the broom and cast a spell on the imps to stop them from casting the transformation spell any further. And after casting the spell on all the imps, we report to the Adventurers Guild investigator, who introduces us to a Makote woman named Titanapa, and she tells us that her daughter, Tamarita, has gone missing. And so the Adventurers Guild investigator asks us to go back to the Great Gourd to see if they have any more cookies to help break the spell. And the Great Gourd has no more cookies and would have to bake more. But the magic's power is limited, and the cookies would need to be eaten shortly after the transformation spell is cast. So by the time a new batch would be baked, it'd be too late. However, if we burn our cool new magic broom mount and spread its ashes on the girl, we should be able to lift the curse, if we're willing to sacrifice our cool new mount. And of course we're heroes. We set our cool new mount on fire and use the ash on the transformed girl to return her to normal. The Continental Circus's plans have been foiled again, and the Great Gourd decides we deserve a reward for our heroics and gives us a new broom mount. And so the rewards this year seemed really good, the story was good, this was a really good event. All Saints' Wake is pretty consistently high tier, and so while the Valentine's Day Fate with the cake baking is probably my favorite single event in 14 history, and the One Little Ladies' Day questline was really well written, overall, All Saints' Wake as a holiday is probably taking the top spot if the quality of this keeps up. Because all the years I've played have been really good, and all the events I've watched thus far have been really good. So 2016's event starts with us talking to a different Adventurers Guild investigator, and you're going to get very used to this guy in the coming years. You're going to see a lot of this guy. And the premise is basically the same. The Adventurers Guild knows that the Continental Circus is full of void scent, and they want us to help volunteer to help with All Saints' Wake festivities to keep an eye on them. And get used to that premise. Also, I have a note here. So the Adventurers Guild investigator, their dialogue actually has a typo. Ostensibly is spelled wrong. It's spelled ostensibly with a B at the beginning, which is not in the proper spelling of the word. A rare typo in Final Fantasy XIV history. And the reason this typo stands out to me so much is because back in the early days of Lipstick, my bassist Steve would use the word quite a bit, and so I picked up on the word from him because I hadn't really heard it before. But I would say ostensibly with a B because I just hadn't read it in a book. And so Steve one day made fun of me for pronouncing it wrong, and he said, "It's clear that Greg doesn't know how to spell this word." And so then I actually looked up and learned how to spell it. And it's always a funny memory for me because that was back in the early days of the band where, like, Steve didn't really, like, respect me as a person, and we weren't really friends yet. And so now, like, we're best friends. But in the early days of the band, he kind of joined the band as a joke, like, "Oh, I'm going to join this hair metal band, haha, won't that be funny?" And then we became best friends. And so it is a funny memory of just, like, him just being kind of mean to me because I didn't know how to spell the word. Man, we go and talk to the illusionist, and they say that this year they prepared a haunted house but need help decorating. And so they need us to go to 3 different city-states to the different guilds to collect items for the haunted house. I also have a note here saying there's a player in the background named Shy Nerd with the title Anime Reading a Book, lol. But anyway, we go to the 3 different city-states to the different guilds to collect items for the haunted house, deliver them back to the illusionist in Gridania, and then we hear the voice of the Great Gourd telling us to visit the place where they work on the hides of the dead if we care about the fate of the living. And so we go to the Leatherworkers Guild, and Mithri, whose video I was watching, talks about how the guild leader of the Leatherworkers Guild is a jerk, so I'm looking forward to seeing the jerk leader of the Leatherworkers Guild when I watch that questline. But anyway, the Impresario and the Illusionist talk about their plan of scaring the citizens of Gridania with the terrors of the haunted house, and thus bringing about the Night of Devilry. The Adventurers Guild Investigator, which I'm just going to refer to as AGI going forward because that's in my notes, and Adventurers Guild Investigator is a mouthful. So when the AGI tells us to explore the house and report back to him so we can explain the attractions to the citizens so that they can be entertained rather than scared. So basically, hey, I'm going to spoil this horror movie for you so that way you don't get scared by watching it. And it's a spoil this haunted house. And so then we do the first ever seasonal duty in the history of Final Fantasy XIV, the Haunted Manor, which is going around the haunted house with a party of 4 solving puzzles. Also, someone in the party chat made an owl, and that was pretty cool. But anyway, we report back to the AGI about our trek through the house, and they've already spread the word about the haunted house and it being illusions and not real, because I guess as long as people know they're illusions, they won't actually be afraid of them. So like, oh no, this is real magic. Like, no, they're just props and stuff, which I guess makes sense in the world of Final Fantasy XIV. Like, if people think that, like, oh, this is all just, like, play and pretend, then they won't be scared. In a world where, like, real magic is a thing, yeah, okay, that checks out. But we see Tamarita from last year with her mother, and it looks like they both had fun and weren't scared. And so the fiends are upset that people had fun instead of being scared, and the Great Gourd watches from a distance and is satisfied in foiling their schemes yet again, and gives us a gift from inside the manor, a vampire vest. And so these early All Saints Wake quests follow a very similar structure where the fiends try to bring about the Night of Devilry, and unlike other seasonal events which tell more of a continuous narrative, these more tend to be like the same idea remixed over and over again. And as we get into later All Saints Wake events, they do tend to focus more on a long-running narrative and character relationships. And, you'll see certain characters evolve and change over the different seasonal events. And so I do prefer that to what they did in these early All Saints Wake events in terms of like there being a continuous narrative. But by that same token, each year is like really strong individually. So this was another good year. 2017's event begins with us talking to the same AGI from last year, and you're going to see a lot of this guy. And he explains that a wolfman from Doma named Soga has come to Gridania to join the Continental Circus. The AGI tried to explain that they're literal fiends and that it's not a good idea to join the Continental Circus, but Soga still wants to join. And the AGI suggests that we try to join the Continental Circus as well to make sure Soga doesn't wind up on the wrong path. And so we meet with Soga, and he explains that Eorzeans fear him, but he feels that if he joined the Continental Circus, he wouldn't be feared, but he would be embraced. Because, the Continental Circus are full of people who look frightening and scary, but that's the fun. People like the frightening and scary Continental Circus people. That's part of the fun of All Saints Wake. And so he feels like, if I look scary, people actually like me in this context. And so we go to join the Continental Circus along with Soga, and the Impresario asks us to help scare people in Gridania as our first duty as members of the Continental Circus. Though the Impresario says we should wear a scarier outfit, and we're given a gear set of werewolf attire. And so we go around saying grrr to NPCs to scare them, and spread the word that the Continental Circus is handing out werewolf outfits to anyone who wants to join in on the fun. The Impresario is happy with our work and all the people we sent their way, and says that they'll give us the proper paperwork to join the Continental Circus soon. And we run into another individual in a werewolf outfit, and they're super happy about it. People are just loving these werewolf outfits. Turns out Gridania is full of furries. And Soga realized that people aren't approaching him with fear, but approaching him as an equal, and the event is letting people see him as just another person, and he really likes that, and decides he wants to go around Eorzea and just make friends with everybody. He wants to be the Kamen Rider Forze of Final Fantasy XIV, and just like, hey, I just met you. You want to be my friend? And so Soga decides not to join the Continental Circus and instead travel Eorzea. And the Adventurers Guild investigator is happy that Soga isn't joining the Continental Circus, and is happy that people are accepting him around Gridania. The Great Gourd watches from a distance, satisfied with the events that have unfolded. 2017 also did bring back the Haunted Manor duty, and so you could do that if you wanted to farm some Halloween cookies to trade for Halloween house decor. 2018's event begins with us talking to the AGI, who is once again suspicious of the Continental Circus and asks us to once again investigate what they have going on this year. We talk with the Impresario, who talks about their cool haunted house and how it's hosting a masquerade, but then feels like somebody is watching him, and we hear a voice saying, "I'm watching you." We follow the sound of the voice to find the Great Gourd and two ghosts, Little Yin and Little Yang, who are apparently objects to art imbued with life by the Great Gourd. So basically they were Halloween decorations that the Great Gourd made come to life. So like Beauty and the Beast, but with Halloween decorations. Except not Beauty and the Beast, because they were people first that got turned into decorations. So actually, no, that is wrong. That is not Beauty and the Beast at all. That's Toy Story. They explained that there was a little girl who was lured into the deepest depths of the manor, and they reveal that the Impresario's plot is to lure people into the manor and turn them into jack-o'-lanterns, terrifying them enough to bring about the Night of Devilry, because, as a reminder, terror equals power for bringing about the Night of Devilry. And so they ask us to foil their plot, and we say yes. And there's a really funny line where they say, "I knew we could count on you." Well, not really, I suppose, since we just met you a few moments ago, but you seem nice. Lol. And so we report this to the AGI, and he tells us that Timarita was reported missing, and is getting the Wood Whalers ready to raid the mansion. And at this point, I'm like, yeah, okay, the Continental Circus is abducting children. They're basically a terrorist organization and need to be stopped. We have been way too lax on them just because they throw a fun Halloween party every year. Like, we do actually need to kick them out of Gridania. They are a dangerous threat. Like, okay, if you're kidnapping children, like, yeah, you gotta go. Although it is strangely, like, historically accurate how certain factions of society are just treated with kid gloves. Like the way the South was treated after the Civil War, when we should have been way more harsh on the South. And we're just like, but like we vibe with you, so we're not going to do anything. Or like, the insurrectionists after January 6th. So it's like, yeah, okay. You do got to sort of bring the hammer down on those people. And so, yeah, the Continental Circus they're terrorists. They need to be stopped. But anyway, the Adventurers Guild investigator tells us to infiltrate the masquerade while he gathers his team, and so we go into the manor. Yin and Yang transform us into a fiend so we can sneak around and gather info on Timarita's whereabouts. We find what we think is Timarita turned into a pumpkin, but it's actually a man in a werewolf costume, Dawkin, who runs away in fear after we return him to normal. We chase him down and find both him and Timarita, and it turns out that Dawkin jumped in front of Timarita when the fiends were casting the pumpkin spell, and then she went into hiding. So Dawkin heroically sacrificed himself to save the child, so hell yeah, Dawkin, you're cool. But luckily, Timarita was hiding in a safe place, and Dawkin offers to escort her out of the manor. And so we go and talk with the Adventurers Guild investigator, and he decides not to raid the manor so that the Continental Circus doesn't know the extent of their forces, which feels like an excuse to keep All Saints' Wake going, because they definitely should have just thrown down at this point. Like, there should have been a full-on fight. The Great Gourd watches from a distance and states that they don't know how the magic brooms following Timarita came to be, and I wonder, like, oh, is that like Matoya? Are those Matoya's brooms? What are they doing here? Are they going to explain this? Spoilers, they don't. But then, as a reward for doing the event, we get Little Yin or Little Yang minions. You only get to pick one. And what's really awesome, because the guy whose video I was watching started singing Total Eclipse of the Heart because the minion descriptions say, turn around, and the other minion description says, every now and then he gets a little bit closer. And so that got me to sub to the guy's channel. Fellow Lalafell player, silly voices, and singing Jim Steinman. Yeah, you get a sub for that. And so if you wanted to get both minions, Lil Yin and Little Yang, you could do a repeatable quest of sneaking around the manor as a fiend to earn the Halloween currency to buy the other minion, or you could do the Haunted Manor seasonal duty, which is back again. The puzzles seem to vary from year to year, but it is once again solving puzzles as a party inside the Haunted Manor. Also, in the Haunted House, there's an imp that allows you to transform into significant NPCs from Final Fantasy XIV. And I'm not sure if it's the first year where it was done, but it was the first year I saw it in a video, and that's always a great part of All Saints' Wake. The guy whose video I was watching had a lot of fun doing emotes. He did like the Mega Flare emote, which looked really cool, and the Power Up emote, which he described as being Dragon Ball Z-esque. And he also did a lot of workout emotes with Nanamo, which was really fun. And then they closed out the video with decorating their house with different Halloween decor. So yeah, that was a solid seasonal event, and I did really enjoy the video that I watched. That was a great way to relive the event for those of us who missed it. 2019's event begins with us once again talking to the Adventurers Guild investigator, and wow, they pretty much all start off with the Adventurers Guild investigator, huh? It was at this point I looked at the seasonal quest list just to see how many of these start with the Adventurers Guild investigator, and it's basically only after I started doing All Saints Wake that they started to move away from starting with the same NPC every year, and started moving towards like the continuous narrative rather than remixing the same general concept. But anyway, the Adventurers Guild investigator, you're never going to guess what he's going to do. He asks us to figure out what dastardly things the Continental Circus is planning. I bet you didn't guess that. If you guessed it right, please hit the like button on this video. But only folks who guessed it right hit the like button. If you didn't guess it, don't hit the like button. Just continue watching. Or do hit the like button. You'll know the truth. But anyway, yes, the Adventurers Guild investigator asks us to figure out what dastardly things the Continental Circus is planning, and it actually doesn't look like they're planning anything too bad. If anything, they need our help. Their Ahriman has gone missing, and they ask us to help them find it. And so we go find the Ahriman with the Great Gourd, who is comforting it, and then the Impresario shows up. We tell him we were talking to the Ogre Pumpkinhead, the alternative name for the Great Gourd, and he scoffs at us because the Ogre Pumpkinhead is mostly mute and wouldn't waste its breath on us. And so this annoys us, and we give him a Paddington hard stare, and the Impresario gets intimidated by our Paddington hard stare, and asks us to train the Ahriman in the art of Paddington hard stares. The Ahriman trainer says, in order to train the Ahriman, we need to learn to ride it first. And so we take our leave of the Impresario, who then talks about awakening the Great Gourd from her slumber and bringing about the Night of Devilry, because, of course, the goal is always to bring about the Night of Devilry. And so we ride the Ahriman around the shroud so it can practice its Paddington hard stare, but it doesn't scare the adventurers, and instead puts them in a jolly mood, including one who clearly just started a new job class because they had to go kill 3 monsters right outside of town. We go back to the Impresario and to report our progress, and he's overjoyed about the Ahriman learning how to do the Paddington hard stare, but the Ahriman wants to leave the Continental Circus and go with us instead. The Impresario is hesitant at first, but realizes the Ahriman could spread terror across the realm if it goes with us, and allows us to leave. Although it's clear that the Ahriman thinks that the Continental Circus people are just toxic, and would rather hang out with us because we're loving and kind and treated well. Like basically we're good pet owners, they're not good pet owners. And so, like, the Ahriman's like, yeah, I'll totally go scare people, but secretly it's like, no, I just want to be, like, pet and just, like, hang out, so, like, I don't really need to scare people. But yeah, as an animal lover, this was one that also made me, like, turn against the Continental Circus even more. Like, okay, so, like, you're kidnapping children and you're mean to animals. Like, I'm ready to throw down with you. But yeah, so reward for doing that is the Ahriman mount. And so after completing that quest, 2 new quests for All Saints Wake open up. One is doing the manor duty again, and another is the Impresario inviting you to the haunted house for a masquerade. And it's literally just going there and talking to the imp who transforms you into different NPCs. And it's really just a way of introducing players to the transformation imp. Because last year it was just sort of like hidden away. And this year they're like, hey, we're going to make it a quest so like you know specifically to find this guy. And so as I was watching the video, the player transferred into a blonde woman from Shadowbringers who I don't know who this character is, and I'm guessing it is a spoiler. And then they rode their mount to an area called Ilmeg, which I also know nothing about. Spoilers! There was no All Saints Wake for 2020 because of the pandemic, so we are jumping straight to 2021. And things are getting mixed up this year. The Adventurers Guild investigator tells us that the Continental Circus is nowhere to be found this year. But a mysterious clown called the Scarlet Snout has appeared and seems to have taken their place filling the void they left behind in leading All Saints Wake celebrations. And so the AGI finds this very sus and asks us to investigate. And so we go around and ask the locals about the Scarlet Snout and find out that he has been inviting people to his house for a feast, but is making them swear to secrecy. And so we share this info with the AGI, and he tells us that the clown has been sighted by the river. And so we go and find the clown, who is Papa Gruff, someone I recognize from future seasonal events, and he invites us to his home and says to meet us under a bridge in Bent Branch Meadows, which immediately gives me It vibes, like, yeah, we all float down here. But anyway, rather than meet up with Papa Gruff, we decide to observe from a safe distance and see him, his wife, and his kid show up, and discuss their plot to lure people to their house and kill them to help bring about the Night of Devilry. We report our findings to the AGI, and he introduces us to Mark, an expert in the occult who will assist us in taking down Papa Gruff. Mark explains that Papa Gruff is the Doomsday Clown, a legendary villain from an ancient text about All Saints Wake that lures its victims to his domain never to return. But luckily, Mark has prepared some items to help us combat Papa Gruff and return the innocents from his domain. A lantern with a light that Void sent to test, and a phial of holy water to protect us and rescue those in Papa Gruff's domain by returning them to their bodies. So I guess their souls have been separated from their bodies, but if we spray some holy water on them, they will return to their bodies and we'll be able to save them. And so Mark won't be going with us. He'll be communicating with us through Link Pearl as we go and enter the seasonal duty, the Phantom's Feast. There are no level or class restrictions. We just go around using the lantern on ghosts to defeat them and use holy water to return the souls of the innocent victims to their bodies. And there are 3 different bosses in the duty. The first boss is Little Gruff, who wants to play a game to see how many chests we can open while avoiding bombs. The second boss is Mama Gruff, who wants us to eat as much as we can to fatten us up, which Mark says is actually safe and better to not make her suspicious of us, so we try to eat as much as we can while fighting off ghosts. And the final boss of the dungeon is Papa Gruff, and we have to fight off ghosts while rescuing as many souls as we can. And Me3, the guy whose video I watched, made a Moogle in the chat after beating the duty, which was pretty fun. And then we go and report to the AGI, and we find out that Papa Gruff plans on inviting more people to more parties, and the Adventurers Guild investigator asks us to stop him while they prepare forces to take him out. And so basically that's the excuse of doing the duty over and over again. So like, oh no, they're throwing another party, we have to stop him again to just, keep that seasonal event loop going. And the rewards for doing the event are a clown outfit, and it was nice to see the origins of Papa Gruff, who has gradually become less villainous over time. Like, he starts off as really a villainous character, and the first year or so where I saw him, he was also a pretty villainous character, but I remember that we sort of put him in his place as we got through the events. And so now he's more just like a relatively harmless NPC, whereas he started off like as a true villain. And so I'm walking away from All Saints Wake thinking that each individual year is really good. And in terms of overarching narrative, it's a little bit repetitive up until, honestly, probably the introduction of Papa Gruff. And then the events really seem like they started to become more unique for each year and develop the lore like other seasonal events. But by that same token, like, all of these are really strong. Like, individually, these are all really strong events. When you add them all up, they're all really good. Like, it's a really stat seasonal event. And so, even though I would have liked it to be a little bit less repetitive in terms of theme, and just every year being like, the AGI needs you to go investigate them, and then you help them with the event, but you secretly sabotage it. That does get a little bit repetitive, but each year is so good that I will probably have to put this at the top of seasonal events thus far. I don't know if Starlight is going to top it, but I think, yeah, All Saints Wake is really strong. I think it's a great holiday. I mean, Halloween's really fun, and I think the 14 devs pretty much nailed it with the seasonal event. And like I said, I do like that they started to do the more continuous narrative thing as they got into later years, so yeah, good stuff, no real complaints. So next up, next week is going to be the Starlight Celebration event. unless I do a video talking about the Final Fantasy IX seasonal event in Another Eden, which is a distinct possibility. They are going to be ending their Final Fantasy IX crossover event in about a month, but they're adding a bunch of new quests that are only going to be available during that time frame. And so that is basically like a month's worth of like extra quests. So that is like a seasonal event, a Final Fantasy seasonal event. So I might be doing a video on that, or I might be doing a video on that in 2 weeks. I don't know if I'm going to do a video on it at all, but that is a distinct possibility. I might be doing a video on that. But the next 14 seasonal event, either way, is going to be Starlight Celebration. So look forward to that either next week or the following, depending on whether or not I do that Final Fantasy IX video. But yeah, once again, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the liking, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff. I appreciate all of you. And I look forward to chatting with you in the comments, on the Discord, and in the next video. Bye, everyone.